Good afternoon. So how are you all today?
Doing good? Doing well.
Okay. So before we get started, I'd love to understand the rigor behind this research of this report. So how does Jobstreet by Seek curate the data for its salary report? And further than that, how does the methodology ensure that it accurately reflects salary trends across industries? Ms. Anna?
As I shared earlier, Jobstreet by Seek comes up with several signature reports annually. One is our customer happiness our happiness index. The other would be the salary pulse, which is what we talked about today. We also have other reports such as top universities that employers hire from or that employers prefer, amongst many. Right? And those reports combine two very, very important sources of information. The first being we partner with reputable institutions that conduct the survey for us. That allows for a significant amount of objectivity, scale in sample sizing. So earlier, Joey said that we have over 1,000 respondents, a diverse portfolio of respondents from the working population, ages between 18 all the way to 64, to ensure that the responses that we get actually allow for higher confidence around the information that we receive. That's part one. The other part is we are a 27-year-old platform that holds majority of the country's employer, job, and job seeker information. That allows for us to look at trends. That allows for us to validate if what we are seeing in the survey actually matches with what we are seeing on the platform itself. And Agu went in a lot of detail on that earlier, which puts us in a very, very strong position to publish all of these reports, allowing us to truly be an information leader in the country, being in a unique position to be the only company to be able to do this here.
That's really nice to hear. And it's really worth noting that Jobstreet has become one of the key sources when it comes to labor market insights. And as Agu mentioned, it gives both hirers and employees relevant and timely perspectives to make these hiring decisions, right? So for our next question, the report highlights that salary fairness no longer equates salary happiness. I think this was really striking point. And what is the biggest takeaway for HR leaders and business owners who want to bridge this gap? Mr. Joey?
Yeah, so in Agu's last slide, no, nakalagay yung not equal, yung dalawa. No? So I think it's very, very evident that there is a gap. No? So if we are talking to an audience that are business leaders, even entrepreneurs that are budding, when we talk to people, there are a lot of things that are to be considered. So in having those conversations, actually, the first and most important thing really is that you have to realize that these salary conversations are actually happening to a person. And a person has a certain context where he or she is in at a certain point of he or her career. So once you have a better understanding of the person's context, you will be able to talk to them better. So it's not just about benchmarking, but rather being able to put yourself, as an employer, as a business owner, in the shoes of another, na makita mo rin yung perspective niya, and in that context, you are able to operate everything. So you will see whether he or she is a provider, is he or she taking care of a sick parent, or even having a newborn. So those things play into those types of conversations. So for me, really, the takeaway is that you have to understand someone else's context as well.
I really like that you took into account and mentioned that at the end of the day, given this data, these are still people that we are interacting with, And rather than just industry benchmarks, we have to take into account their whole experience. So for our next question, we see that Gen Z is being significantly more assertive for asking in pay raises and negotiating. Why do you think why do you think so, and how should companies adapt their performance review conversations for this younger workforce? Mr. Agu?
So I think based on the report, we can see that this is a combination of three things. First, as I presented earlier, the report has surfaced that a lot or most of Gen Z has actually received a pay rise of within the last 12 months. So while this does coincide with their early position within their careers, and it coincides with the normal pay progression that comes with that, it does give them the sort of a boost in confidence, knowing that their work does increase in value as time progresses. Secondly, they're also the generation who is the most confident with their job security. So compared to millennials and Gen X, they're more confident that their current jobs are safe and that their future jobs are safe as well. So, and the third thing is actually not part of this report, but something that we learned in the report that we released a few months ago, the Workplace Happiness Index. It's that Gen Z is actually the generation that dreads going to work the most. So this at about 40% compared to about 30% for the other two generations, they're the ones that really dread going to work. They get the Sunday blues thinking about work on Monday. So when you combine the confidence of receiving pay rises within the last 12 months, the fact that their jobs are secure, and the fact that they might be frustrated or stressed over their work, they are more confident in approaching their leaders and asking for pay rise. On a more personal note as well, I've sort of also observed that the entire generation tends to be more proactive in earning for themselves. Aside from maybe starting their own small businesses, you see a lot of Gen Z leveraging content creation or monetizing off platforms like YouTube and TikTok. So they're really go-getters in terms of being able to earn for themselves. So I actually would go against what a lot of other people would say, that Gen Z is not entitled. They're just empowered to get what they want. And maybe for someone in the older generation, that might rub them the wrong way, but I think that's something that all of us can learn in terms of reaching for and grabbing what we deserve.
They are extremely vocal. I think we gotta hand it to them. They are extremely vocal. Not in the report, but moving into, I guess, a more practical side here, right? And there's actually a statistic in the report. 85% have asked for a pay rise and received a pay rise. So yes, they are very vocal, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Because you can get a yes. 85% got the yes. So I think that's one thing we can also take away from this report. Joey talked about both sides of the coin. Agu did as well, where the employers talking to their employees around what the market standards are, what the progressive movement of their salaries can be with performance. It's very important. But at the same time, employees also being upfront and honest about what their expectations are, that's also equally important. We have seen so many employers that are actually proud and excited to share with the employees some of the pay rises that they have prepared for them, only to be responded to with disappointment. We need to meet in the middle here so that expectations are set, and that's extremely, extremely important.
Sir Joey, do you have anything to add?
Aside from Gen Zs being vocal, I think they're also a generation wherein, a lot of us perceive it as they're reckless or careless, but they're really just a bit bolder in terms of taking life by its throat. No? That's how I often view it at that note. And we can learn a lot from them actually. Especially, I'm from the millennial generation, and actually as you get older, the more content you become, no? But then they're living life vicariously, as Agu was mentioning. So I think a little bit of boldness. And as Dan mentioned, that 85% actually who asked received. No? So I think it's worth having that conversation. No? And sometimes if you see yourself in the mirror and say, ang baba ng worth ko, ang baba ng sweldo ko, and all those things, maybe it's up to you as well to work on that aspect of your life. And a lot of Gen Zs are good examples to that as well.
I just want to lend one more lens here, just as an added nuance to this. And it's not going to be in the report per se, but veers on very practical situations. Right? Your millennials are in an age where they are building families. They're in a life transition stage, whereas your Gen Zs are predominantly in a starting stage. So very different needs as well. That's why the beauty of this report is it balances fairness when it comes to benchmarks, but it also takes into consideration happiness, which is deeply personal. I am a millennial, but I don't have kids. So the amount of expenses that I have to accommodate for are going to be very different from a millennial that is starting to build out their family or is on their third kid that's starting preschool. So very different contexts there. So I wouldn't box it in to Gen Zs are more aggressive and more vocal. They are, but it's not the only reason why they get higher pay rises, or it's not the only reason why they're happy. They're vocal, but their life stage is also very different.
Thank you so much. I think it's so important to understand these generational shifts because, as you mentioned, it is very different, and the way that millennials versus Gen Z view certain opportunities can differ variously. So with that, we'd like to open the floor to anybody who has questions. Personally, I actually have a question, so I'll begin.
I thought those were your questions.
I have a question. I have a separate question. So, sir, you mentioned that Gen Z dreads going to work the most. So between Gen Z and millennials, which generation do you think is more challenging to manage or to hire?
I think on a personal level, it really depends on the type of work that you do. I think when it comes to office settings, personally, I find millennials easier to manage. I feel like that's a product of the situation and the times that we grew up in. We've worked with Gen X for a long time. If you're an older millennial, you've worked with boomers as well. So that type of working culture is very different, especially, and that really shows itself in like an office setting like this. But I feel like for a lot of the more unconventional industries, let's say like in creatives, in music, in nightlife, and things like that, Gen Z actually has a place where they can really shine. I think the natural differences in generations does provide a lot of friction. We all grew up in different backgrounds in different times, so managing these differences in each generation are always going to be there. But if you're able to place a millennial or a Gen Z in a job that they're truly qualified for, in a job that truly matches them and their skill, then it becomes a lot easier to manage them regardless of what generation they come from.
Do you have anything to add to this?
The question really is, ano ba yung mas madali i-manage? No? So I guess it depends how you hire. So I've managed millennials and I've managed Gen Zs, and luckily I haven't had any troubles or problems. No? So to what Agu was talking about as well, if you hire for fit, it's really gonna make your life easier. So a lot of these things are actually taken into consideration as well in the hiring process. Personally, I take time in terms of hiring. And sa totoo lang, I rarely do I look at the generation, age, etc. We always, here at least in SEEK, we always look at experience and what they're capable of at that moment in time, and we also hire for potential. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We'd like to open the floor for questions. I'll be going around. If you have a question, please raise your hand. You have a question right here. Can you please state your name and the publication you're from?
Good afternoon po. Maulang afternoon pala. I'm Les Aheria from Business Mirror. And I would just like to ask, anyone can answer naman po, if 80% ng Filipino workers doon sa studies and na they feel fairly or well paid, tas yung 59% doon are actually happy with their salary, what explains that 21-point gap?
Okay. So based on the study, when we say that the pay is fair, the context really is in normal parlance, sakto lang ba siya? So, when we say that a pay is fair, from the people that were surveyed, they were looking at it at a lens na ito ba yung nasa range ko, depende sa role ko, and ito ba yung capability ng employer ko magbigay ng certain salary. So they were looking at that. So actually, when we say that a pay is fair, they're looking at external factors, no? Rather than ano yung sarili nilang pangangailangan. Yung second level, when we talk about happiness, or yung pagiging sapat or more than sapat, really is more on their personal take. No? So again, take into consideration na yung context ng person, whether or not they are feeding a family, taking care of people. No? So happiness, yun yung more or less doon nakikita kung happy ba sila or sapat ba yung fair. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Just a follow-up po on a bigger issue. Given yung 85 pesos na wage increase in Metro Manila, paano siya tinitake into account ng mga employers? Like, how are employers expected to factor that higher mandatory wage into their compensation budget, let's say for 2027?
Okay. I will try to answer it without being political. Okay. So to a lot of companies that we talk to, no, we present this data and these types of information. Little do we talk about the minimum wage, to be honest, no, when we have these conversations. Where we skew towards actually is where you will be able to retain a good talent, no, or a right fit for the role, no. So to answer your question, truthfully, we don't even talk about minimum wages when we talk about our clients or our partners. Because we really want to uplift where we are. No? So that's part of the mission and vision of how we operate as a business really. So again, back to what we said a while ago, no? we want people to have fulfilling and meaningful working lives outside of just having a simple job for every Filipino as well. No? So regarding that, those conversations, we talk about these and a lot more things, no? Yung workplace happiness, and as Dan was mentioning also, na we have studies also about where the top graduates are coming from, and all those things. No? So when we take a stab at it, and in the conversations we have with our hires and our partners, really about upping it even further, no? Para mas tumaas yung 59, and even the 80%, no? So that is a conversation what we have, no? So
I just want to add to that because I also want to make sure that when employers take a look at overall salary budgets for the year, they look at all roles. So your minimum wage workers all the way to your executives. That's a total lump sum budget. Then you have your operating costs. I don't want this to turn into a P&L lecture, but just speaking from a standpoint of someone who looks over a P&L, those are definitely considerations. So yes, the very practical answer to that is the minimum wage increase will definitely have an impact to the financials of employers. How employers and companies deal with that would be through multiple factors. One is an expectation on an increase in output. Right? Are my employees effective? Are my employees productive? Because it's mandatory. Wala namang mag-withhold nun. But what do I get out of that increase? I think it's the most practical answer that they will have for themselves and the conversations that they will have with their employees. How can I be more productive? How can my employees be more productive? So that the growth of the business is able to financially accommodate the increase in costs. Because that definitely becomes a company cost and a company increase. So those are some of the tensions that companies deal with. But as Joey mentioned, organizations now look beyond salaries. In the past 3 years of all of our signature reports, what has been consistent is that compensation is baseline. After you deal with compensation, benefits, flexibility, career progression are also extremely important topics. So I guess the summary of this is employers will deal with the increase in minimum wage. Employers will also have an expectation on productivity and improvement in outcomes, but they will also continue to have conversations around improvements on benefits, improvements on flexibility, improvements on career progression to make this a very holistic situation. Because as Joey mentioned, the meat of the conversation that we have with employers now is about how do we keep employees. And that is a very holistic conversation.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any here?
Sorry.
Can you please state your name and your publication?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Francesca Policar from Manila Bulletin. So, first of all, job well done po to all the speakers regarding this topic about satisfaction, fairness, and salary, about pay rises here in the Philippines. So, it was mentioned earlier regarding what employers should or can do if they won't immediately approve the pay raise their employees might ask. So, for the first question, is salary still the biggest factor when people choose a job? And in addition to that, what should companies prioritize today to keep up with the changing expectation of Filipino workers? Thank you.
Right. So thanks for the question, Francesca. So I guess on the topic of what do workers prize the most when it comes to their job, we have a separate study that we released a few months ago, the Workplace Happiness Index, and we actually discovered there that for the Philippines, salary is not even the number one consideration for what makes you happy at work. I'm not gonna skirt around the fact that when we all apply for jobs, the salary that we get is a very big consideration. That's never going to disappear because that's the whole purpose of having a job in this society and in how society works. No? But more important than that is actually the purpose that they receive at work. So especially for Filipinos, what we prize the most is actually the purpose that we have at work and knowing that the work we do contributes to something more than ourselves, that we are helping a company grow and succeed, that we're helping change the Philippines and develop it for the better. So that is something that employers can also look for or look to when structuring their pay, the compensation, and just how they position themselves as well to their employees. I'm sorry, there was a second part to your question?
What should companies prioritize today to keep up with the changing expectations of Filipino workers?
Right. Okay. So aside from benchmarking your salaries and checking on the satisfaction of the pay satisfaction of your employees, it's also important to look at things from a very holistic picture. So aside from the pay, are there other benefits or allowances or whatever that you are offering your employees, whether that's a flexible schedule, that's the power to bring your kids to work, for example, bring your pets to work. All these cute little benefits actually add on and sometimes become even more valuable to some people than the actual pay that they receive. And aside from that, linking it as well to what we found with the Workplace Happiness Index, it's always important to instill and maintain the value that each worker has within their company. That each and every one of the people within your company or your organization knows that their work is valued and that it's contributing to something bigger. And that aside from the pay, there is a emotional level of fulfillment that you get with the jobs that you provide.
It's not going to be an either or. No Filipino would say, because this is not all Filipinos will say, because this is very purposeful, kahit na sobrang baba ng sweldo, okay lang. What Agu is trying to say is that it is no longer just one single consideration. It is no longer salary alone. It is no longer purpose alone. It is not benefits alone. It's a combination of all. We'll get you a copy of the happiness report.
Thank you so much. And for our last question, we have
Hello po, I'm Phoebe from Banana Standard. Since you guys have this hiring partners or what do you call this partners, does this report that you guys do here in Jobstreet get recognized and acknowledged by these employers? If so, how?
The partners that we have to run the surveys are the top survey providers globally. So Joey shared a bit of detail on that earlier. To ensure that the quality as well as the reliability of the survey is up to a global standard. At the same time, I've shared earlier that these reports are coupled with local data, survey respondents locally, and also platform data that we see within the Philippine markets on our own platform. So merging those together. This allows us to be in a very strong position to talk to our partner employers, the companies in this country, and majority of the companies in this country use Jobstreet by Seek to hire, which means they do rely heavily on our data as well to aid in decision making. Earlier, I started with what our purpose and what our mission is, because that's really something that we take to heart. Because in order for us to provide a job for every Filipino, to provide meaningful and fulfilling working lives, and helping organizations succeed, these reports form part as key decision point areas. So how employers trust us, how job seekers trust us, that's absolutely critical because that influences decision making. So if you think about it, 5 years ago, before the pandemic even, there was never any conversation around mental health benefits or pet benefits even, right? But because of all of the reports that we are able to publish and share, it influences decision making. So we have so many companies now. I have a dog. So there are so many companies now that provide for, pet benefits as well, that provide for flexibility at work. Because again, if they just rely on their internal surveys, it's a very limited sample size. But when they couple that with information that we are able to give them, which are highly, highly reliable because the sample size is countrywide, is APAC-wide, then that makes their conviction to make changes. Kasi magpapa-approve din yan internally eh. Kailangan nila ng reliable basis para mag-budget, para magpa-approve, para ma-roll out. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah, additional point to that actually. So our signature reports are actually used also by the government. By DOLE. Some of our reports actually were mentioned in Senate hearing inquiries as well. So, kasi we've been here for the longest time, as Dan mentioned.
27 years.
So that's why we are a thought leader in the space as well. So a lot of these reports actually are referenced by a lot of studies also. So yeah.
Thank you so much. A lot of people have other questions, but we are down to our last 2 questions. So for our first one, we have.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Angela from LoveTeachingAngel.com. So, since we're talking about having pay rises, let's talk about the newly graduates. Because we know that there are some top universities, the usual graduates, especially new graduates, they're already expecting to get higher salary at the first job already. So, are we expecting this kind of phenomenon as well as we go? Let these freshly graduates to apply as well for this generation?
I think there are two areas to consider for your question. Number one, the expectations on what they should ask for and what is actually available in the market and what kind of conversations need to be made around that. So I think there are a lot of fresh graduates, and I feel like this is why this whole phenomena has come to light because of social media and all of the conversations around it. There are certain pay expectations. Our fresh graduates are very intelligent people. They run the math. More often than not, they take a look at what did my parents spend on for my education, how do I pay them back? But they don't talk about that on social media. This is why I'm asking for the salary kasi I want ROI. So there are several sides to look at here, which is always a very interesting point of conversation. However, because they are a generation that has access to so much information and data, they are able to be grounded. So when they know that a role that they're applying for actually has a particular range, then no matter what other role they look at, it will still be in that range. It grounds the thinking. So it's always a conversation to be made. Much like how Agus said, whether you're asking for an increase in salary or you're asking for salary for the first time, information is power. That aids in decision making for them. They can ask. Doesn't mean that they will receive, especially if it's significantly above market. Now, what other fresh graduates do, which we highly, highly recommend, is they beef up their credentials. what they go through is multiple internship programs to really make their proof points a lot meatier. So when they undergo interviews, they're extremely competitive with those with experience already. So their salary benchmark is not for zero experience. Their salary benchmark now goes with multiple years of experience. Those are some areas that allow for them to bump it up.
Yeah, but to answer your question, we also share this with universities. So I know the context of it, no. So we've seen in social media and TikTok all those that are asking for quote unquote absurd salaries, no. Ako naman, if I were the parents of those kids, ask away. So yun nga yung nakalagay din dito. You really have to ask away. 85% of those who ask actually receive, no. But we do recognize the fact that there are market caps in certain situations. No? So we look at, again, this will give them a very holistic view as well of market caps, how organizations operate. No? Kasi a lot of these fresh graduates, of course, they just value themselves high. No? So hindi naman masama yun. But again, we need to pull them into reality and ground them. So that is why we also shared this with their placement offices. Also, to answer your question, most of the schools and universities, they also access this, especially the placement offices. They ask help from us in terms of like placing their graduates as well. So this data is available to them.
And just as one last point to add, I think that's where it's also important now more than ever that employers are also start to become more transparent or at least provide more insight into how they make decisions and how they compensate new hires and fresh graduates. I mean, for some fresh graduates, they might see a report and think, I can become a full stack developer. I should ask for 138,000 pesos per month for my first job. But that lacks the understanding of what the employers are thinking when they're crafting these compensation packages and they offer these jobs to students, or rather fresh graduates. So yeah, I think it's a conversation that needs to start happening. And thank you for your question because now I have a new thing to bring back to our market insights team so that we can start shedding light on that topic.
Just to follow up then, because the context is about the experience. Kasi most of the people will get that ick feeling, especially the millennials. I'm a millennial actually. So when a student or a fresh graduate student will ask me that they will want a higher salary than my current salary right now. So it will be giving me an ick feeling. So for us millennials, how can we open these kinds of conversation in a healthy and positive way? Because right now, as we speak, even the boomers, when they hear young students or even fresh graduates right now, when they ask for higher salary, sasabihin nga nila, ako nga, ito lang yung salary ko, ganito na akong years na akong trabaho, boomer na ako, I'm already at my 50s, ganito pa rin trabaho, and now you are a graduate, freshly you graduate, bago ka pa lang, nag-ask ka na agad ng higher salary. So, how can we make this more positive po and encouraging po to our young people and the whole generation per se? Thank you.
When I get those kinds of answers or those kinds of questions are around salary scale, the first thing I ask candidates is, why do you think you should get that amount? I try to ground my thinking as well around, ano ba to? Taas naman ang expectation niya into, bakit kaya ito yung iniisip niyang tama? And then from there, that allows employers to be in a position to actually talk about, for the factors that you are considering, these are the pay ranges. What you had in mind is a good starting point, pero the amounts are not appropriate to market. And then you take it as a conversation. Similar as to they asked, they may or may not receive. You respond, and they may or may not accept. And that's a reality. But I think the information flow is very, very important, which is why reports like this really matter. Whether it goes to government, it goes to employers, because they're the ones that are responding to future employees or fresh grads. It goes to placement offices in order for our educators to give this information back to future employees of the market. But at the core of it, it's really information dissemination and conversations.
Yeah, and to add to that, no, I've talked to a lot of job seekers, candidates, fresh graduates, even peers that are executives, no. Sometimes it all boils down to the point na kung paano mo ba nabenta yung sarili mo previously. And at the same time, with reports like these nga, you will actually, kumbaga mamumulat ka, no? If you're underpaid, if you're swerteng-swerte ka pala, if you're sakto lang. So, a lot of these things are actually moments of realizations. No? So, if you're the older one that accepted sa okay na at sapat na, who are you to say na ganun dapat for everyone? So, it's really about one's career journey. No? So, hindi siya one size fits all, no, na narrative, no, for everyone. So everyone will go through this rat race, this career, each in their own pace. So ako, how I would navigate these types of conversation, no, I would simply say na, oh, it's your own path, no. So you're carving your own path. You will get your break in year 4 or 5. It doesn't happen all the time. At the same time, no, it doesn't happen all at the same time. Sometimes people get their break year 3, year 4, no. So it's similar to how like an athlete is, right? So a lot of like elite athletes would get their big contract year 1. Those are outliers, but some would actually, the average of an NBA player, they would get their biggest contract on year 7 and 8. So it really depends on the person. So what I would suggest in having these conversations is just say that everyone has a different career path, and each career path is unique, and no two career paths are the same ever. Yeah.
Thank you so much. For our last question, please introduce yourself and
Hello, one quick question. My name is Rain Checkblock. Actually, you made some suggestions about this earlier, and some hints also. Does the study? I haven't seen the study yet. Does the study include how employers or HR currently view pay rise conversations, or how do they actually handle it? Was there a standardized by the book response for this? Thank you.
The survey is to the job seekers or employees rather. Sorry, the survey is to employees. So what the report contains would be recommendations rather than current standards. The way we've chosen to approach this is rather than a to and from approach, is to move into where we need to be. Because at the end of the day, different employers would have different approaches. Global companies would have very, very different approaches to very local companies, traditional, non-traditional. So it would be a lot more challenging to outline what the current is and sample size that. But what we do outline is how these conversations should be made, which Agu talked about earlier. Set a baseline for what the market standards are, but this is definitely not enough. Talk about the context of the employee, the scope that they are fulfilling, commensurate to the activities that they can do to progressively move their salaries upwards. What does that look like? So if I were to summarize it, we look at 3 areas really. The first is transparency over compensation ranges. And the internet is here, so they can do a quick search and see what the ranges are. You can actually do that on Jobstreet. You can search what the ranges by job type are. So it's not that difficult. So having that conversation with your employees about that, absolutely critical, so that you can assure them that they are within market. Number 1. Number 2 is expand the conversation to anchor pay increases with performance. Earlier, Agu talked about how those that have pay rises tied to performance are actually much happier. I believe it was 78%, if I recall correctly. 78% are happier when they know that when they work harder, they get paid more. Versus standard company-wide increases, which has a lower happiness percentage versus the rest. So, and then the last point is expand the conversation beyond compensation. Go with benefits, talk about flexibility, talk about career progression. So those 3 points will really allow for employers and employees to have healthier conversations and influence happiness. Kasi medyo straightforward yung baselining, naka-market study yun, available na yun almost everywhere. And with the reports that we provide, it's really available. Expand the conversation to something lengthier. That's really what adds value.
Thank you so much to our media partners for such relevant questions, and of course to our speakers for such insightful answers. Can I please have you stand for a quick photo?